Yesterday, the Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, announcing an amnesty for hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, here in the United States of America. I should point out that illegal aliens and the open border are wildly unpopular with the American voter. But the Biden administration decided they would twist the knife yesterday. And it's not without some pushback. In fact, there are a number of groups who are now launching lawsuits against the Biden administration, trying to stop this atrocity. And among them, my next guest from the Immigration Reform Law Institute, the Director of Investigations, Matt O'Brien, is with us now. Matt, great to have you with us on the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
What to make of Joe Biden's announcement yesterday and this decision to offer amnesty this year?
Well, this is DACA all over again. So they got called by the court down in Texas for doing the illegal DACA program, and they can't rely on deferred action. So what they decided to do was twist the parole authority all out of whack so that they can create another amnesty by executive fiat. And it's just an unconstitutional abuse of the parole power.
Yeah, in other words, like they're telling hundreds of thousands of people who are here illegally, hey, no problem, you violated the nation's laws. We're just going to ignore that and, in fact, put you on a pathway to citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's a reward for breaking our immigration laws. I mean, if you think about this in any other area of law, if you break the law, the longer you get away with it, the harsher the sentence. But what we're saying here is that if you've managed to violate the immigration laws for 10 years and then marry an American, now all of a sudden we're going to treat you like somebody who obeyed the law and tried to get a green card the legal way.
I've heard this week the phrase undocumented spouses to refer to the people who are going to be able to get a hold of this amnesty should it come to pass. Does that make any sense to you, somebody being referred to as an undocumented spouse?
No, the whole term undocumented is silly, and what it's designed to do is try and portray breaking the immigration law as something that's akin to a traffic ticket. However, for the people that are fans of that phrase, undocumented, I suggest the next time they get pulled over by a state trooper and they don't have a license, they try and tell them that they're an undocumented driver. I mean, it's just silliness. It's to try and take away the fact that when you break the immigration laws, what you're essentially doing is engaging in a criminal trespass in the United States.
Sure. Yeah, and when they use phrases like undocumented, they're pretending like it's a jump ball whether or not you're an illegal immigrant. Of course you are. You're an illegal alien. It's not a mystery. You are. That's pretty wild. So what has been the track record with these types of amnesties? When you have somebody like President Obama or now subsequently President Biden announce just by a wave of their hand or just a stroke of the pen that they're granting amnesty to illegal foreign nationals. What is the success rate of those claims?
They're pretty unsuccessful. The problem with these types of plans is that everyone, even the people making them, know they're illegal from the start, and so they're inevitably going to get lawsuits and pushback on this. The trouble is that you will have activist judges in left-leaning courts that will hear suits on behalf of people that get this form of relief, just like they did with DACA, and they'll come up with all kinds of silly pseudo-civil rights reasons why people shouldn't be deported after they got this or why this entitles them to something, which that's the major danger with these kind of programs because, we have an Immigration and Nationality Act that sets out requirements for coming into the U.S. for a reason.
Yeah.
And under our system, the president can't just unilaterally decide to change that because he doesn't like it. It requires an authorization from Congress.
Oh, one of the obvious impacts of just offering waivers to violations of law by illegal foreign nationals is you're disenfranchising American citizens in any number of ways. One of them is by taking their hard-earned tax dollars and then using them on people who don't deserve them to begin with. Another is if you're turning foreign nationals who broke our laws to get in here into American citizens, you are watering down the voting rights of American citizens everywhere by granting that privilege to people who shouldn't be here in the first place.
I couldn't agree with you more. And then you add to that the problem that you're sending a clear message to the rest of the world that we don't care about the security of our borders and we don't care about our own immigration laws. And it tells people, if you get here and you manage to stay, eventually we will reward you with the ultimate gift, a path to American citizenship, because you broke our laws. And it's a slap in the face to all the law-abiding immigrants who have been waiting in line for years in places like India and the Philippines.
Yeah, that has been the pattern, hasn't it? So when America has offered amnesties from time to time, and each time that's only led to more illegal migration into the country, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. The reason that we're having the problem that we have now with immigration is because of the 1986 amnesty. And the 1986 amnesty is the amnesty that wouldn't die. I mean, there have been classes of people that didn't apply for it for whatever reason, some because they had criminal convictions, some of them because they failed to meet deadlines. And they've gone in and sued, and the courts have found that, they're entitled to another bite at the apple. So the 86 amnesty, the final legal action that took place on it was sometime around like 2015, 2016.
Right. Yet Congress, every so often, they keep working up, including Republicans, a couple years back. Remember that Lindsey Graham amnesty? These guys were all trying to figure out yet another way to offer amnesty. It just never works out well, does it?
No, it doesn't, because this is something that every parent understands. If you reward bad behavior, what do you get? More bad behavior. So if you want to have a coherent immigration system, you have to apply it equally across the board, and you can't undermine it by your own actions. And I think what Republicans like Lindsey Graham don't understand is that when they support these measures, they think that they're somehow being kind to people. But what they're doing is they're undermining the border security, which when taken to its logical extension leads to the kind of chaos that we have on the southern border now, and basically gets people killed. It's not kind to encourage these kinds of policies.
No.
It leads to human smuggling, sex trafficking, people dying in the desert when they make poor decisions about how to get here. It's just very cruel.
So as I understand, you can help me with the legal side of this. When you bring a lawsuit against the federal government for something like this, or against Joe Biden, the Biden administration, typically you have to establish that you have standing, that you have a party that's been harmed here. How do you do that when you bring these legal cases?
Well, typically with cases like these, you want a state as a client. And because of the interest, particularly that border states have, they can go ahead and challenge these kind of actions. Even some of the states in the interior have been successful with claims based on the amount of money that they have to spend in order to fund these programs. So that's one way. Occasionally, you will have a situation where an individual is negatively affected by this, and you can bring a suit on behalf of the individual. But these things are complex, and there have been a few of these lawsuits that have been tried where they were, in fact, lost on the standing issues. So this is a complicated thing, but it's important because it's hard to convey how flagrant the complete and intentional ignorance of the Immigration and Nationality Act is here. The Biden administration knows that it is violating the existing law, and it thinks it can get away with it, so that's why it's doing it.
So can like Laken Riley's family sue the federal government? Can Rachel Morin's family, the families of people who've been killed by illegal aliens who were allowed into the country by the feds, do they have standing in a court process?
Most often they don't, because there's a line of Supreme Court cases saying that while the government has a responsibility to provide basic law and order services and things like fire protection, it doesn't have a legal obligation to protect any specific individual in a certain circumstance. And that's based on the otherwise reasonable notion that there's no way the government can guarantee all of our safety. But that's frustrating, because if I were Laken Riley's parents, I would be thinking that there ought to be a way for me to sue the government, because this is completely irresponsible. And the fact is that every crime that is committed by an illegal alien is a crime that by definition was 100% preventable, because if that person wasn't in the United States, they wouldn't have been able to prey upon an American.
So as I mentioned at the outset, Matt O'Brien, and we're talking to Matt, again, O'Brien from the Immigration Reform Law Institute, there are a number of organizations that are already firing up lawsuits against Biden for the amnesty he announced yesterday. Can you give me a sense of the battlefield? How much more active are people nowadays, legal organizations, in trying to stop all of this? And what are you seeing out there?
Well, it's interesting. So under the prior administration, what we were doing was trying to defend actions that were lawful, that were being taken in order to protect the American public. What's happened now is that we are trying to find ways to contest actions that aren't lawful. And we've had a history, unfortunately, over the last 4 or 5 decades with administrations, both Republican and Democrat, ignoring portions of the immigration law that they either dislike or that they feel puts them in a negative position with constituencies that they want to appeal to. It's sort of an up and down trying to deal with those. But what we've seen with the DACA program, and now under this administration with the number of different programs they've tried, there's just a complete unwillingness to obey the law and a flagrant disregard to just try and do things by executive fiat without going through the constitutional process and seeking congressional authorization. And that's coupled with a lot of bad decisions from activist judges who want to make policy from the bench rather than applying the law to the facts like they're bound to by their oath.
Matt O'Brien, have you ever seen an administration that has been quite as unconstitutionally guided as the Biden administration?
Never. And I mean, the abuse of the parole authority is a perfect example. Parole is a legal fiction that pretends that somebody is at the border applying to get in while they're physically allowed into the U.S. And it exists for the convenience of the U.S. government. It's really an artifact of the Cold War when it allowed the U.S. to give temporary shelter to communist dissidents. And it was always something that was done on a case-by-case basis, and it was used very infrequently. Well, when the amnesty was rolled out in 1986, the Immigration and Naturalization Service started giving pre-authorized parole to people who needed to leave the United States while they were waiting for their amnesty applications to be approved. And that was never an intended use of parole, and that's not anything that is consistent with the parole statute. And this parole in place program was done without any statutory authorization as a benefit for military spouses, because commanders were expressing concerns that service members who had married illegal aliens were worried about them while they were on deployment. And it's frustrating to me. I think we have laws for a purpose, and if the government doesn't obey them, then we're in a situation of anarchy. And at least in prior administrations, there was a respect for the fact that parole was a special power for the convenience of the government that should be used sparingly. And now they're trying to convert it into a get-out-of-jail-free pass for every immigration violator who has unlawfully entered the U.S. And that's a scary prospect, because it means none of our immigration laws mean anything if there's a catch-all exemption that the government can use whenever it wants.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that these days. Matt O'Brien, again, with the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Thank you, sir, for your expertise and your time today. Really good to talk to you.